Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you on May 9th, 2026 for Reason to Resist from the hills outside of Kalamata, Greece. Before I launch into this brief episode where I'll talk about the events or lack thereof in the Iran war during the past 24 hours, I wanted to wish all solidarity and goodwill to our comrades in the Russian Federation and in the other former republics of the Soviet Union on this Victory Day 2026 in commemoration of the immense, incalculable sacrifice made by the peoples of the Soviet Union to the defeat of Nazism. This, of course, is not intended in any way, shape, or form to diminish the contribution of any of the persons who laid down their lives, whether they come from the West or the East. But I think fair-minded observers who have knowledge of the history of this terrible war would not hesitate to say that the greatest sacrifice of all in the defeat of Nazism was made by the peoples of the Soviet Union. In any case, I'll turn now to the question of the Iran war. And I guess the remarkable thing about my report today is that I don't have anything meaningful to report. It is eerily quiet on the Iranian front. I have seen no reports within the past 24 hours of attacks by the U.S. military or any of its allies in the region of West Asia on Iranian ships. I've seen no reports of attacks on land-based facilities or land-based targets within Iran. I have seen no reports of retaliatory strikes by the Iranian military or any strikes of any nature by the Iranian military on U.S. military targets, Israel, or any of the states in the region of West Asia that are allied with the United States. And in fact, I checked Donald Trump's Truth Social account just a few moments ago, and the usually loquacious Donald has only put out one post in the last 24 hours that had anything to do with Iran. It was a post about a poll conducted by something called the Neapolitan News, which I had never heard of before, which purports to have found that 53% of Americans feel it's more important to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon than it is to end the war on Iran. Now, I'll just comment briefly on that poll. I'm not in a position to say whether it was conducted in a manner that is statistically sound, whether it was done in conformity with generally accepted polling practices. But let's assume for the purposes of argument that it was. I would say that the poll sets up a false dichotomy, putting people to a choice between preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and ending the war. There is, in fact, a third option, a nonviolent option for preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and that is negotiation and concessions. And in fact, the poll, I suspect, didn't point out to the people to whom this question was posed that before this war was launched, Iran had no nuclear weapons and had forsworn nuclear weapons, even though we were told over a period of several decades that it was on the verge of obtaining nuclear weapons. So I don't attach any importance to this poll, but obviously Donald Trump is trying to convince people that there is majority support for this unmitigated disaster that he and Netanyahu have unleashed upon the entire world. So there are, I guess, a few possibilities as to why there has been apparently no activity of a military nature, and even the statements that are coming out of the leaders of these two belligerents are slim to none. I did check as well the X account of the foreign minister of Iran. There were no statements of any kind over the last 24 hours on his X account, Abbas Araghchi. And Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the lead negotiator, he too has not put out any statements on his X account during the past 24 hours. So what is going on here? Well, this could be purely random. You know, all wars lull, enter periods of lull. They ebb and they flow. And maybe this is just a rare moment when neither side, for whatever reasons, is in a position or feels it necessary to conduct any military operations. It's also possible that there are negotiations going on And so they've decided to put aside their military activities, to suspend them, to see where these might lead. I personally attach very little importance, or I attach very little weight to that possibility. I think it's extremely unlikely that that's the reason for this lull in military operations, because, as I've said many times, there's absolutely no indication that the negotiating positions of the two sides, Iran and the United States, overlap in any respect, whether we're talking about the lifting of sanctions, whether we're talking about the unfreezing of Iranian assets, the removal of U.S. military bases from the region, the enrichment of uranium by Iran, the possession of a ballistic missile arsenal, reparations, support for the axis of resistance. They are miles apart, based upon their public statements, on every single issue that matters to one or the other side in this so-called negotiation. And there's no reason to believe that that has changed within the past 24 hours. So I don't think that's likely to be the reason for this quiet period. Another possibility is that the United States and Israel are on the verge of launching a massive attack upon Iran, and they are of the view either they're preparing to making the final preparations to launch that attack, or they perhaps are of the view that if they engage in no military operations for a brief period of time, that may engender a sense of complacency amongst the military and political leadership of Iran. And finally, and this is the possibility that I think is most likely the explanation for the temporary pause in military operations, it is entirely possible that yesterday the Iranian military put an ass-kicking on the U.S. Navy by causing severe damage to one or more of its destroyers. We know that its destroyers were fired upon. The United States admitted as much, and U.S. officials told CBS News that destroyers had come under a complex and intense attack. That's the way they put it. We know that Iran is perfectly capable of hitting valuable military hardware belonging to the United States. And if in fact they succeeded in inflicting significant damage on one or more U.S. destroyers, which is what the Iranian military claimed, I can imagine that the U.S. military leadership and Donald Trump are in the middle of having some very difficult conversations about what to do next, because this is obviously a suicide mission, sending U.S. destroyers, other major naval vessels from the United States into the Strait of Hormuz without the consent of the Iranian military. But we'll have to see. Whatever is going on, it is certainly good news, albeit perhaps of a temporary nature, that there's no fighting today. At the end of the day, however, the fundamental problem is that the maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz is at a standstill. I saw a report that over the last 3 days, not a single commercial vessel has gone through the Strait of Hormuz. Even if a few have managed to make it through, it would constitute a tiny fraction of the level of traffic we saw through the Strait of Hormuz before this criminal war of aggression was launched. And therefore, the supplies of oil and gas and other essential commodities will continue to become more and more constrained in the days, months, and God forbid the weeks or years, I should say, ahead. That is a problem that cannot be solved militarily. And I think it would be, to put it mildly, a strategic disaster for the United States to leave Iran in control of the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore effectively 20 to 30% of the world's oil supply, when there was no control being exerted by Iran over maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz before the war began. And so the United States, whatever brave face Donald Trump may be attempting to put on, is unquestionably going to be desperate to end Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz in any way that it can. And as I said, the only way to do that is non-military. It's namely making a series of painful concessions to Iran. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about today related to the Iran war is this whole theory that was put forward. Well, I guess they put it forward more as more than a theory, but rather as an explanation for why Donald Trump suspended his so-called Project Freedom within about a day of it having been commenced. The theory propounded by NBC News based upon two unnamed sources from the US government was that the Saudis and other Arab vassals of Washington were so agitated about the fact that they had not been given advance notice about Project Freedom that when they learned of it, they forbade the United States military from using their airspace or military bases on their territory to conduct the operation. Now, for a variety of reasons, I have poo-pooed this idea. I don't believe the story is true. I'm not going to read all the reasons why, but I wanted to bring to the attention of my audience that Larry Johnson has weighed in on the veracity of this story. And Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, very knowledgeable, and I think not only a knowledgeable commentator with considerable expertise in intelligence and military matters, but also a person of considerable integrity. Somebody I listen to quite a bit. I learned quite a bit from listening to Larry Johnson, even though I may not always agree with him. And Larry Johnson, yesterday, I believe it was, on an alternative media platform, said that it might have been Dialogue Works with Nima, said that he had asked a source who is well placed to know the truth of this matter, that's the way I think Larry put it, about whether or not this was true, that the Saudis had basically scuppered the entire enterprise, the Project Freedom, by telling the Americans they couldn't use Saudi airspace or military bases. And his source, whom Larry says he considers to be reliable, told him that it was true. And I thought that as a journalistic matter, I should make you aware of that, because, as I say, Larry is a serious commentator. And I don't doubt that he does have sources within the United States government. And this raises an important question, because we see increasing use, both in the corporate and the alternative media, but especially the corporate media, of anonymous sources to put forward quite important and sometimes controversial theories about what is actually going on behind the scenes. And so I'm going to offer my view about how people should deal not just with this particular source that Larry is relying upon, but the whole question of anonymous sources. My own view is that I attach little weight to anonymous sources unless I myself know who they are. And based upon my knowledge of their record, have reason to believe, good reason to believe, that they are credible and reliable and in fact informed about the matters that they comment upon. If I don't know who these people are, and I don't even know, what position they have within the government, how it is that they claim to have access to the information that they're providing on an anonymous basis, if I've never spoken to them and I've got no way of assessing their credibility or how well informed they actually are, it would be irrational of me to place a lot of weight on what they say. Now, it may well be that Larry, I'm sure Larry does feel that he has good reason to regard this source as reliable. But if I were to know this person or meet this person, whoever it may be, and ask them a series of questions, I may come to a different conclusion. In good faith, just come to a different conclusion from Larry. Perhaps Larry had a certain interpretation of what this person told him, and I might have had a different interpretation if I had heard whatever it is that this person told Larry about this so-called Saudi intervention. Perhaps this person is him or herself misinformed. They think they know the truth, but they've received erroneous information from somebody else. I mean, it's just impossible to know. And so we really need to be very, very careful, especially when you're talking about important geopolitical issues, in placing undue weight on anonymous sources. And one other thing I'll add, and this is not in any way, shape, or form intended as a criticism of Larry, but Larry was told by another source, maybe the same person, it may be a different person, but one that he regards as reliable, that the United States and Israel were going to attack Iran on May 7th. That was something that Larry shared with various audiences on various platforms a few days before May 7th came and went. And of course, although there were skirmishes on May 7th, there was no resumption of the war by the United States and Israel. Certainly nothing happened that could be characterized as a resumption of the all-out war that was taking place before. So that source, whoever it may have been, appears to have been mistaken, or perhaps Larry honestly misinterpreted what he was told by that source. But in any case, this just goes to highlight, and this sort of thing, by the way, happens all the time in journalism. People rely on anonymous sources, and it turns out that they were wrong. And this just goes to highlight that we really have to be very careful about attaching undue importance to claims made by persons about whom we know nothing. And I also want to explain briefly before I sign off today why this issue of whether or not Saudi Arabia intervened is important. It seems to me that there's a lot of hopium circulating within the alternative media about the ability and willingness of the Arab autocracies to stand up to the United States. I've seen a lot of discussion and debate about the possibility of, Qatar and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and maybe, Jordan, finally growing a spine, the autocrats of these countries, and telling the American military to pack up and leave. Frankly, I just think this is fantastical thinking. There is absolutely no reason to believe, based on their records, that they would ever demonstrate that kind of spine. These people have seen over and over again that the United States and Israel are willing to murder the leaders of predominantly Muslim and Arab states who don't do the bidding of Washington. They will also murder their family members. They will take away their wealth. They will even destroy their countries if that doesn't suffice for Washington to get its way. They've seen this in Technicolor during this genocidal rampage by Israel over the last 2.5 years. So not only that, but the preservation and expansion of their wealth, their very prodigious wealth, they're paid very handsomely to be vassals of Washington, depends on the patronage of the United States military, the protection of the United States military. And finally, they've allowed the foxes into the henhouse. The U.S. military has bases all throughout these countries, which would make it, quite easy for the United States government to overthrow their regimes if they felt that they were not being sufficiently subservient to Washington. I'll believe it when I see it, folks. You show me an Arab autocrat, whether it be the King of Jordan, the so-called Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the Emirs of Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, whoever, you show me an instance in which they have actually said no to the United States, stood up to the United States in a matter that was of great importance to the United States, like, for example, the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and got away with it. And then maybe I'll begin to contemplate this as a realistic possibility. I think the only way we're ever going to see a return to sovereignty by any of these countries, assuming that they were ever sovereign, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, and so forth, is regime change. These corrupt, cowardly vassals who are extraordinarily wealthy, extraordinarily greedy, couldn't give a damn about ordinary human beings, including in particular the Palestinian people. They're never going to do the right thing. There's no reason to believe they'll ever do the right thing. And unless and until the fine peoples of these countries throw off the yoke of their oppression, they will continue to do Washington's bidding. They may complain from time to time. They may grouse. They may try to cajole or persuade the United States not to pursue a course of action that they feel is ill-advised. But at the end of the day, if Washington says it's this way or the highway, for them it will be this way. I think that should be your operating assumption. In any case, I'm going to be signing off today. I wish you all an excellent weekend. I'll be traveling tomorrow, Sunday, to Athens, and probably will not be in a position to put out a report, although if there's some sudden, vitally significant development in the region of West Asia or in some other part of the world that we've been covering here on Reason to Resist, I'll probably find an opportunity to deliver the information to you tomorrow. Until then, again, I wish you the best on this Victory Day 2026, and I'm signing off from the hills outside of Kalamata, Greece.